All right, welcome everybody. We have our screen share here, and I'm excited that you're here to help me be the first responders to see how this compelling vision Bible study is going to come out. They asked me to do some writing about part of the vision statement, and I see that they're advertising that there's Bible studies that are coming out soon. So I guess that means I have to hurry up and get this one completed. So I'm very interested in all your reactions and what you have to say. So welcome, everyone. We got, let's see. Yeah, I think okay, we got six of us. Six screens here.
I brought a partner in crime. I brought my girlfriend, Sherilyn Johnson. We were going to watch a movie tonight, so I talked her into sitting in with me.
Oh, nice. Well, okay. Enjoy the the movie and the sit by the fireside or something and have a nice chat here.
You got it.
Welcome,
Barbara, hi.
welcome, Barbara, and we've got Logan in Ohio, and Barbara in Portland or Eugene, Oregon. So we'll have some great interstate input here. So a little bit about this Bible study. I was assigned these three passages, four passages, two from Matthew, one from Ephesians, and one from Micah. And the compelling vision is stated here, and maybe someone will read that compelling vision for all of us. This is the draft compelling vision that will be talked about at annual conference in 2021 and possibly be approved.
Together as the Church of the Brethren, we will passionately live and share the radical transformation and holistic peace of Jesus Christ through relationship-based neighborhood engagement. To move us forward, we will develop a culture of calling and equipping disciples who are innovative, adaptable, and fearless.
Thank you, Vivian. So you might have guessed that two words in red ink, those are the only two words that I get to talk about for the compelling vision. So the focus question is what they assigned me. What is the nature of the holistic peace of Jesus Christ, and how are we called to embody it? So this is my summary of what I think that means, and I'd like to get your input. The Church of the Brethren has an understanding of peace that the world needs so very much. And our denomination has declared that all war is sin, and yet the holistic peace of Jesus Christ goes far beyond war to touch on all aspects of life. We live in a tug of war between personal peacemaking and systemic peacemaking. Because both lessons are taught by Jesus Christ and both are important, we will have the opportunity in a divided world to bring about justice with peace for all God's children and all God's creation. So anybody have any response to that statement?
I like it.
You like it? Have you heard the phrase "all war is sin" in the Church of the Brethren?
Yes. I mean, I was raised with that at the Araba Bethel Church of the Brethren in Araba, Colorado, out on the Eastern Plains.
Okay. And I noticed I used a violent image here. Vicki is always talking to me about violent images. We live in a tug of war. Maybe that's a children's game. I don't know. But it seems like we have a rural divide and a city divide, but we also have personal peacemaking and personal salvation and systemic peacemaking and systemic salvation. And that's what I wanted to bring into the conversation. Has anybody else seen that two kind of tug of war kind of thing? And
Oh, I think it's definitely true. I mean, you could think of it as dualistic. You could think of it as tension versus tug of war. You could, tug of war is okay. Um, uh, Although it is warlike language, it might be we could creatively come up with something else. Um, uh, but the individual versus the community, I think that fits real strongly with our pietist upbringings. But yeah, I think the dualism is real relevant. And I like that you have a divided world to bring about justice with peace for all God's children and all God's creation. And I think that's part of the holistic piece, is thinking of all of God's creation, of everything. I mean, we're at war with the earth right now, and the earth is winning. The earth will win.
Yeah, there were so many things to talk about in holistic peace. I kept thinking, how can I narrow this down?
Right.
Yeah, one of your challenges is to keep to the word count they're allowing you.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like I saw in a different discussion, the all war is sin comes from an annual conference um, vote or whatever. I think from the 1930s is what I saw. And of course, there's some previous history to that. But then there'd be a lot of other, I know you're not about necessarily the annual conference papers, but there are lots that could be referenced in terms of what peace is about.
right. So I get, I think it's 600 words. I get 100 words here. I get 600 words in the next section. And this one has to talk about the scripture reflection. And then I have to come up with discussion questions to help put that into, um, to give it some some relevance to people's real lives. So a lot of this was what we've been doing. I was happy to say that our Bible study had already been talking about Sermon on the Mount, so I was happy to have that under my belt with this group. So we know that Jesus was talking to a whole bunch of people. We've been talking about who was Jesus talking to, and there's some debate, but we know from chapter 4 that someone want to read verses 24 and 25 out of Matthew, um, verses chapter 4, 24 and 25.
I'll read it for you.
Okay, thanks, Donna.
So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, demonics, epileptics, paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and from the Decapolis and from Jerusalem and Judea and from beyond the Jordan.
So we think that this was a sermon that was given to people who were in huge need of healing and transformation in their lives, and so they were not only coming to him because he was famous, but they were coming because they were incredibly desperate. So the first thing that Jesus does for this crowd is to bless them, to bless the people who are not usually ones who get blessed. You usually don't bless demoniacs, people who were being haunted by demons, and you usually don't bless paralytics, people that don't get around very well because they can't move or walk. So he's getting in touch with all these people who are out on the fringes. And great crowds came from far away. So this is not a blessing for the rich, right? We say, blessed are the poor in spirit. And then finally, verse 9 is my verse. Someone want to read verse 9?
Chapter 5, Gail.
Chapter 5, verse 9, yeah.
Okay. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God.
Okay, mine says children of God. So one of the things that's interesting to me is children can look a lot like their parents. So if we are looking like our parent, then we would resemble God by being a peacemaker. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to. Would people say, "Oh, you must be so and so's child because you look like a peacemaker"? Maybe we would
So
have.
Gail,
Yeah,
um, I just wanted to read. I actually, I have a different version. I have the Message version, and I
yeah.
really like how it puts this. So it says, "You are blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family."
Wow, wow. That's really strong.
That ties right into what you're trying to accomplish here, I think.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to reference that in. Everybody should read the. Which version did you say it was?
That's the Message version.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really, and we've referenced that before, but that's really powerful. So so this, if blessed are those who cooperate. It sure doesn't look like what we're seeing in the news.
Yeah. I'm gonna do a little poke critique kind of thing,
Yes.
in terms of what I see that you've written. Where is it? I've lost it. It's the generals. Military military experts and generals need not apply. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Military experts and generals need not apply. We have known colonels, a colonel who was a part of our congregation, and he realized obviously that he was in the military, but I'm pretty sure he considered himself a peacemaker. And I think generals do the same, and military experts do the same. So by saying that, I think you're setting yourself up for a sideways kind of conversation that people will jump into readily, because we have folks who belong to the Church of the Brethren who are, you know, committed to the military. So I think it's a red herring, and I'd almost suggest deleting it, because I think everything else you have makes so much sense. And
That
yeah, it
that
may.
might be where I put in the Message version, and that might make it be a lot more applicable. Just quote that maybe instead, where it
Mhm.
says, "Blessed are those who are conflict resolvers."
Yeah, I think it would be better without that sentence also. Our person who belonged to our church, his logic was there had to be a balance of power. So he thought he was helping get the balance of power in the military. But
So
his mother was a Church of the Brethren, so he'd grown up in our church.
so he
Uh,
was thought of himself definitely as a peacemaker too, is what you're saying.
yeah, by keeping the balance of power, that
Right.
it's
So
yeah, it's probably not good for helping this, as she says, it might make people get sidetracked.
Right. Right.
I mean,
In many ways, yeah.
I
In
think
many
Jesus
ways,
was. Go ahead.
okay, in many ways, he was more of a pacifist than I am. I mean, except for the area of war. You know, Jefferson Davis calls you to go and fight, you're duty bound to go and fight. And I never agreed with him on that, but he was very peaceful on everything else.
Right. Yeah.
Jesus was clearly about nonviolence. He had all the power at his fingertips, and he chose not to use it. So he was definitely about compassion and nonviolence. And so, yeah, that's, yeah.
Right. So I'm
Just,
going to go ahead.
just for my own information, my experience with brethren churches has been relatively narrow in terms of my knowledge of individual churches. Has it always been that the Church of the Brethren was a peace church, but had a number of folks who were affiliated with the military as a part of it? Or originally was that kind of a no-no? I mean, when I became a Christian, the pastor of our church at that point, part of my vows of becoming a Christian was that I would not take up arms against my fellow man. And so I'm wondering how pervasive this is in the church, and how does all that fit, I guess. I'm not sure how to even ask the question.
I know there's some great research by Jeff Bach, a former Bethany Seminary professor, and he was doing original research from Civil War days, and you were not, those who had gone to war in the Civil War had to go through a period of repentance, and it was a definite shift to say that if you wanted to be a part of this church, you had to lay down that soldier kind of occupation and that behavior. Then we have the recent research by Bowman. What's his first name?
Carl Bowman.
Carl Bowman, that's doing some recent studies in the 2000s about how pacifist are our local congregations, and we don't score incredibly high compared to other denominations, but I forget. We don't all agree on that anymore, is the bottom line.
Well, I think a general statement would be that historically the Church of the Brethren has moved away from distinctives. I mean, in terms of dress, in terms of, military participation. I mean, clearly World War II, I think that, the percentages in like 70-80% of brethren served in the military. There's always been conscientious objection, and I'm not positive of that percentage, but it was pretty high. And certainly Vietnam War had some of that kind as well. So, and so maybe there's something in there. So, what? I don't think anyone's going to say I'm against peace, right? I mean, I think you can get that. You can get agreement on the key. Then is how do we? What kind of discussions can we have? And I think Vicky's point was really helpful to try not to get sidetracked, because that won't get you anywhere. But focusing on what Jesus had to say.
Well, that's my next lead, and I have to share my screen here. Oops, that's not the one I want, sorry. If I can get there, screen share.
Well, while you play with the screen share, I mean, the other thing is maybe you do want to have that conversation. So, I mean, that's another piece. It's just be intentional and know what you want and what your goal is, because our congregations, we really have shifted from predominantly from a pacifist, you're not going to go out and shoot anybody, to all those folks who are a part of the military, and today is Veterans Day, and Yeah, so it is highly relevant to people and their lives.
Right, right. And I think that we're not going to solve. I mean, this is built to be a Bible study that people would spend about an hour in Sunday school talking about. So we're probably not going to solve that problem in a 1 hour Sunday school. But focusing on stuff that Jesus said. I love these. I love these images. Stuff that Jesus didn't say. Don't talk about religion in public. It's uncomfortable and rude. Or your sickness is a test from God. So do communion wrong and you'll get sick and die. So all the things that can be red herrings can be things that we think Jesus said, but yeah, it didn't really. So that was part of my attempt to make this interesting for youth as well as adults. So you can tell me how that works. Kind of sick humor there. Yeah, I think I'm going to change this to called the Just Peace. I've been looking that up in the messenger. I think it's going to be called the Just Peace Church, where um, you're you're not you're not. I'll have to do some more research, but we're not just living as Christians. We're living as just Christians who are thinking in terms of justice and peace. So
Maybe another way to approach it would be, you'd have to figure out how to edit, but Jesus taught and said things that made people uncomfortable. And sometimes our interpretations take off some of that discomfort, which maybe is not nearly as helpful. In other words, we're trying to get, we don't want to ruffle anybody's feather or make them feel bad or whatever, but maybe that's part of, where you have a community to wrestle with that. That's just a thought of mine.
okay, thank you. So our peacemaking did not die out with Jesus' death. It has been one of the treasured gifts that we have helped shape for the times we live in and passed on to each generation. I think Fred said that that's part of what he received. Does anybody else think that they have been given this as a treasure to take care of as a Church of the Brethren person?
Well, I don't know that I have, but I think it is true. And when I have talked with, now I forgot his name, Stan Nossinger, I mean, he as he does his work was doing his work within the World Council of Churches, he would often reflect on how the Church of the Brethren has a very unique and specific voice about peace that other Christians just don't get. And I think it really is our reason for being in so many ways, that we have a history and just a whole culture in a sense, and I don't know if norms are the right word, but a much greater built-in sense of what peacemaking is and how Jesus reflected that and how the scriptures reflect that. So I think it's a hugely important voice. I don't know, Barbara, you look like maybe.
Muted.
Someone want to
Vicki,
unmute?
you're asking me to respond to that. I just got my laptop up and working. I agree with you. That's the bottom line. I think that the Church of the Brethren does have a special role, and it has to do with the peace witness and understanding.
You asked if anybody else had been raised with that belief. I was definitely raised with all war is sin. and that Jesus taught peacemaking. My father's brother was in prison during the First World War in Fort Leavenworth because he was a conscientious objector. And my brother, Gordon, was almost headed for prison in the Second World War, except that they finally got him classified correctly. But the draft board said he knew he was a conscientious objector in Illinois, but he wasn't going to give that to him. Then in Iowa, the Iowa draft board wrote to the Illinois draft board when we moved back to Iowa and said, if you know he is a conscientious objector, you have to give him that classification. And then it came, and so he was in Fall Furious, Texas for a couple of years doing his
So
work.
this is one area where I like to comment. Sorry, I didn't mean to, I don't know if I was cutting anyone off, but this is one area where I like to comment because I did not grow up Church of the Brethren. I came into it as a teenager and then fully became a member as an adult. But I think this is one area where Church of the Brethren does so great and so poor. So we do great because we have this historical belief that all war is sin, and we have this historical context, and we have this great way that we can share this, but we also do so poor by not sharing it and using that as our way to bring in new people. I think people are, especially now in the world, are so sick of all the tug of war, of all the just not having a peaceful life, that it is one advantage that we have another way of living that we can show people. And I don't think we do it as a denomination, not specifically churches, but as a denomination, I don't think we do a good enough job.
So there's certainly a message that needs to be heard, and are we the ones to tell it? Are we the ones to share it? Are we the ones to tell it?
Just a note on what you had read from your scripture earlier. It talked about competition as well, and the need to win. And it seems like philosophically in our world today, we place a bunch of emphasis on the need to win. And I'd not, been familiar with that particular scripture verse in that particular translation, but I think it's interesting because I think that also plays into how we view how to keep the peace.
Win or lose, yeah. And it's either or instead of both and. Yeah, good point.
Well, my wife decided to tell me that this week that even the children's show Daniel Tiger, which is mirrored off of Mr. Rogers, teaches the children on how to respond when they lose, like specifically in a vote or what have you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so we need to channel Mr. Rogers into our denomination.
Maybe something about, maybe you have it a little later, but working towards peace. In other words, that's something that people can be called to do, whether or not they agree all war is sin, for example, right? It could create conversations around things like, well, the violence in our violence shouldn't be our first resort when issues come up. And I'm just riffing, thinking off top of my head. What if our defense budget was $715 billion? Why can't we find $1 billion or $2 billion for hunger or education or whatever, right? So that's incrementalism and that's politics, and I understand that, and I would be frustrated by some of that, but it also is creating alternatives. So again, how you put that into 600 words, I don't know, but.
So part of my scripture is this, turn the other cheek and go the other mile. That's part of the assignment that I got, and I think that speaks a little bit to Dave's point. But we looked at Walter Wink before when we were talking about forgive us our sins as we forgive, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, and how persons in South Africa had to forgive. Well, he also, the same theologian also talks about this, to me, a jaw-dropping translation of what it means to turn the other cheek. If I had turned the other cheek, then I would be slapped. So I'd be slapped with backhand, but if I turn the other cheek, I'd be slapped with a open hand. And open hand was a making that was an act of defiance, and so it was a total way of standing up to the person for their wrongdoing and not just letting them walk all over you. So basically, if you made them take off your coat, you would force them to show that you were naked because you had that was the only garment you had, or to go another mile meant that you were violating the Roman soldier's law. So it's a way of looking at this passage that to me has given me a whole nother perspective, like, if someone's being a bully, well, then what does that mean? What options do I have in my toolkit? So that's been instrumental for me anyway.
I think I think the Walter Wink interpretation of all of that is great, because it feels like it's giving power as opposed to that sense of wimpiness, which is how peace is often interpreted. So I think that's great.
Has anybody else read that besides Vicki and me? This might be a new.
I had read it too, and it was a huge shock to me to realize that it's the opposite of how I grew up being taught about it. That I put in the chat that the Walk the Other Miler asked for the cloak. Both had gigantic fines, and it was like 1 year's salary. So you wouldn't want to ask the other person to walk the second mile, and you wouldn't want them to take off the cloak and be shown naked, because then it also embarrasses the person who demands that.
And reflects poorly back on the demander, right?
Right. So that's just totally the opposite of what we normally think.
Right.
How we were taught in Sunday school.
Right. Barbara's also written in the chat. Her father was also a conscientious objector in Illinois, World War II. So she grew up in the York Center Church of the Brethren in Illinois, and also at Manchester. The message is very clear: all war is sin. But even Manchester no longer has such high Brethren enrollment. It's gotten watered down, and that, like she said, these walk the mile or give the cloak has huge fines for the offender. My new discovery is Howard Thurman, and he's such an influential person on Martin Luther King Jr. and Andrew Young and a lot of the persons that, John Lewis, who just died, and they asked him, why are you a black man here as a Christian in Ceylon? What's wrong with you? You should be fighting the Christians because they've treated you so poorly all these years. And Thurman said that Jesus grew up in the Roman Empire as part of the underprivileged, non-powerful, disinherited. So his book was Jesus and the Disinherited. And those who are also disinherited know, wherever his spirit appears, the oppressed gather fresh courage, for he announced the good news that fear, hypocrisy, and hatred need have no dominion over them. So a huge understanding of what peace looks like to me was that, you're not going to be, it's not going to be peace without any, with just niceness and be quiet. It's peace with power and integrity and a new way of living. So these are some of the questions that I've come up with. Evidently, the Decapolis and regions beyond the Jordan meant that people were going to travel and walk 70 or 80 or 100 miles to see Jesus. And we talked about this a little bit, what lack of peace in their lives might have motivated them to seek Jesus. There's probably a whole lot of reasons people went out of their way to listen to Jesus.
Yeah, and maybe that, I'm thinking about what Logan had said, in terms of, see, I didn't grow up in the Brethren either, and I mean, I never really thought too much about, I was Catholic, and so the whole, I mean, my dad was in the military. He's in World War II, and most of his working life when I was a kid was working for the government. So, and when I originally made a faith commitment, it was about me and Jesus. But then, the Brethren opened my eyes, and it could have been other places that, to this peace message, which just really changed my orientation to the world. And, I mean, this is just a quick aside. I still remember learning about World War I and the Brethren backing down and feeling like, why did you back down? The message was so compelling to me. And of course, I've learned much since then about some of the reasons why that happened. But something about what you said, Logan, just kind of resonates. This is good stuff, right? And while we may not agree how to get there, just kind of the whole holistic peace idea. It's not just about war, but all the ways that violence, especially in our American society, shapes us, and we just don't think about it very much.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's why I like that question that you have, or some sort of variation off what David just said. Is your question is what motivates you to seek the holistic peace of Christ? I mean, that's a real powerful kind of a question. And then there's from what Dave said, you could do any number of variations on a theme about, really having people consider the whys and the whats and wherefores of what peace is for our church, our denomination, and how well do we do it? Well, not so well? Do we need to do better?
I have a question down here that says, who would be attracted? So we have a current issues that attempt to divide Christian. How does applying personal peacemaking provide another way of living? And how does applying systemic peacemaking provide another way of living? Who would be attracted to applying both? Maybe that's the language I could. Who would be attracted to being a part of both types of peacemaking, or something like that? To being.
Mm-hmm.
Something like
I
that.
think the people that would be attracted, if you're asking like what type, or I don't know, but if you could get over the negative stereotypes of Christianity and what it means to be a Christian, you would definitely find a lot of my generation would be absolutely on board with peacemaking and just, I don't know what else were we talking about.
Justice.
Justice, yeah, peacemaking and like social justice. My generation would be a perfect group to snag, and we know that we need it because the church can't survive forever. But we just have to find a way to kind of push those negative stereotypes that they see in televangelism, maybe, I don't know, but what they see right now from mainstream Christianity, to kind of push their thinking forward just a little bit more out of that comfort zone of what they're seeing and say, we do have a different way. We have a way for that you may like, and we have a way that we see Jesus that you're not exposed to. So maybe listen to what we have to say. If it's for you, great, we're happy to have you. And if it's not, you can still work with us in that peacemaking and justice.
Right. That's really important. And I keep thinking that it's so needed in the world. I just don't know how to say it. It's so desperately needed.
Well, number 2 or 3 above, you have that video about the gun stuff, gun violence. So that's that's a very specific way to try to get folks to think a little differently, and and number 3 with Howard Thurman. And I don't know, I know folks. If you say anything about Black Lives Matter, they just turn off, right? And you don't have that in there, but gosh, conversations about racial issues in our country are just so important and needed right now. So again, I'm just reflecting on things you might think about adding or wording a little different.
Yeah, and this goes to an editor, so I don't know what actually will happen. There's some more pieces that I didn't add to this. My assignment also includes some gathering prompts, how to get people engaged in some compelling response. How are you going to respond to this? How is your life supposed to be different after you've been through the Bible study? So I didn't put, you don't get to see the whole package, but I'm giving you. So this one I thought would be a great way to get out some of the stuff about Black Lives Matter or gay lesbian issues, or if people, I started listing them. I thought, well, that's not good. People can list their own. There's so many issues that try to divide Christians, it seems like. So this is a shout out, the fruits of the Spirit, a shout out to the pietists that Vicki was preaching to us in our district as our district moderator. Do people know what systemic peacemaking means? Is that too?
Gail, I do not. And I think explain it or use a different word for us people that are not very knowledgeable, please.
Okay, so I should make it clear up here. Systemic means parts of the society's systems that that would be just or unjust, and they try to make things like lopsided or disadvantaged for some people over others. So if I were going to tackle
You mean like the tax code?
the like redlining for people who wanted to do banking or a tax code, or yeah, so redlining means if I want to buy a house, there's a circle that's made that's outside of my control that says no Black people can buy a house in this area. And so no matter what I do or how much money I have, I'm not allowed to buy a house. I'm not allowed to get a loan even, in some of the systemic peacemaking.
Yeah, I think it's some kind of language about changing structures that do not bring about justice in people's lives, something like that.
Yeah.
And then you could give it an example or two of that.
Well, I only get 100 words, but other than
Yeah, I know. This
Like
is not easy.
policies and procedures,
yeah,
words that are more common, but also use the word systemic, because people are hearing that more, but they might not understand it.
yeah.
it's hard because some people, most people don't understand how gigantic this problem is in the United States.
That's the problem. It's so big, it's so normal, it's so imbued in all that we think and do. In some ways it's almost impossible to see if you don't kind of get, you know, you you need the you're disenfranchised folks. It's whoever you were naming in one of your other paragraphs. Those are the folks who need to speak to. Let me describe, you know, and maybe that's an activity or something that you do as a response to, if you find systemic whatever hard to understand, talk to somebody who can help you, who has really experienced it. So man, I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley, more or less, of Virginia, and apple orchards and peach orchards everywhere. And folks would say, how come those black folks aren't out? I mean, why do they spend all their money buying a Cadillac and a big color TV? There's a reason for that nobody could understand. They couldn't do it. If they couldn't go buy a house in my neighborhood, they weren't allowed. I mean, in some places there were actual rules, and other places it was just understood by the bankers or the real estate people. This is what you do, and this is where you direct folks. And so that's the systemic built-in stuff that you just never see even. Anyway,
Well, just peace. Who knew 2 words could be so so large and overwhelming?
Well, and to me, if it's normal, in quotes out of quotes, you can't see it.
Right. And there is no problem if you can't see it. Problem? What problem? There's no problem with justice.
It's the way it's always been. You don't notice it. You know, it's like if you're any other condition. If you
If
know,
you're
go ahead.
Yeah, if you're breathing smoke.
Well, you know, and part of the, like number 3, where you have who are the disinherited in our society today, there you're putting the, you know, opening it up for discussion. You're not necessarily trying to, you know, flesh out every single issue, right? So, I mean, you're trying to come up with questions that will spark discussion, and you don't have to control that. And every community that does this is probably going to go in different directions, and that's okay. We kind of trust the spirit, and that there are people in any community who have sensitivity to that and will raise some of the issues, you know, that we're starting to bring up. So maybe that makes your task a little easier, Gail. You don't have to cover everything.
Well, here's my name the issues that divide us. I don't have to name them. You can.
Right.
So, you know, I have the Micah passage, beat your swords into plowshares. I have the breaking down the walls between us, the Ephesian passage, and I do almost nothing with those. There's so many things you could say about each one of those passages. So you know, and maybe, you know, maybe there's other questions that are more important here than you know, I just think that we have so many walls that try to divide us that you know, climate care. You know, I went to a workshop and they said we have to call it climate crisis. You know, because it is. You can't name it. You can't sugarcoat it. It's not a climate issue. It's a climate crisis. So I threw that one in there.
But brethren don't generally like anything that could cause conflict and separate themselves from other brethren.
Right.
So choosing, I want to affirm your seeking to choose language that is going to help people keep their minds functioning so that they can participate. But I do want to echo what Dave shared about in various groups. I think that the tables or wherever people are sitting, that or breakout rooms or whatever, that I was very impressed with the Intercultural Ministries Ubuntu reading group, that everybody was east of Chicago except for me in that group. And I was just astonished and warmed by, 50 brethren who really wanted to go in deep and study and understand what's going on in the United States. And so I'm more optimistic that those folks will speak up when they're in a group of other people.
Oh, and they're sprinkled all through the denomination in the East. Ooh.
In the East? No way.
I know, it was amazing. I was so warmed by it and encouraged, because I usually think that people west of Chicago are more willing to dive in and share, brethren anyway.
So on number 4, I wanted to quote John Lewis and his idea of getting into good trouble. I don't know if that is going to be divisive, but it seems so powerful when he was featured for the entire nation in the world.
I think you
Here's
should
the
leave
risk.
it.
Say what, Logan?
I think you should leave it.
Okay.
I mean, I get that it can be divisive depending on the group that's, reading that and that's doing that as a Bible study. But I think that they can come to their own conclusion as to how they want to see that, but it at least opens that door. But maybe it's just something that they haven't even thought about or they hadn't heard, because all they had heard about John Lewis was bad, 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 So
Right.
if they hear something good, or even if they don't like it, they can choose to skip over that, but it does give them the option to hear it.
Yeah, I hope so. Well, Barbara, thank you. She has to go off to her other meeting, but thank you for this insight.
I,
Go ahead.
I agree too. I would certainly leave that in. I think I think it stimulates thought and to some extent forces us to think about interventions that can cause peace and justice.
Yeah, he was a person who walked the walk.
And I don't think that you put it in any type of, like, I don't know, inciting way. I mean, you tied it to scripture. Find scripture. You're not saying, follow what John Lewis said. You're encouraging them to find, what did Jesus say to get you into this. I think you're fine there.
Yeah, so like I said, it'll go to the editor, so we'll see what happens.
Oh, and do you give, I just don't remember, further resources or whatever? A book like The Upside Down Kingdom, which many people over the years have found to be incredibly helpful, provocative, but it's really accessible. Something like that continues the conversation.
Yeah, I'm supposed to use reference to a YouTube and a poem, or so a bunch of different media, not just books. So,
right.
But that's a
Here's
good
my
one.
book. Here's my book.
Yeah, you got it upside down there, Dave.
Well, it's just backwards. What can I say?
There you go. Yeah, that's a good reminder. That's a good reminder. So this one is, this passage is pretty, I don't know if people want to do a brief quick look at Ephesians 3, verses 11 through 22. Oops, I got the wrong chapter here. And I'll do the quick version. So Jesus Christ, in whom we have access to God in boldness and confidence through faith in him. I pray, therefore, that you may not lose heart over my sufferings. For this reason, I pray that, this is not, I got the wrong chapter. So, yeah, he has broken down the dividing wall, that is the hostility between us. He has abolished the law with its commandments and ordinances, that he might create in himself one new humanity in place of the two. So, there we are no longer strangers, but we are citizens, and we are brought together by the Spirit. So I'm thinking that I mentioned some of these things like COVID, and I go ahead and list some of these things that divide us. I don't know if that's a good idea or not.
Well, and that's looks like it's chapter 2, Ephesians 2.
Uh-oh. Sorry.
I
That's
think you
yeah,
can
it
double
is.
check. Yeah.
That's a huge error. Yeah, it is chapter 2. Thank you, editor. So this is really helpful. I'm really very, very grateful for your insights, and I have some. I'm glad I didn't send this to the editor yet, so I can tweak it a little bit here. Anything else you want to share with the group?
Oh, I think you're on, you're on the right track. You got so many things you can do here. Like you say, it's so big. It's how do you create something that people can get good handholds on and have good conversation about, however it goes for them, because everybody is going to have a different kind of a conversation. So I'd love for you to be able to use the AJ Musty quote. I don't know if you can or not, but it's just, there is no way to peace. Peace is the way. And what does that mean? So.
Yeah. Yeah, there's there's some references where you can use quotes, and that's a good one. There's some great Martin Luther King quotes. Boy, you can just fill your whole page up.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know that the
I'd
AJ
like,
Musty, that one doesn't get used all that much. It probably needs to be revived.
I'd like to ask for prayers for my brother Gordon Oliver, who's in the hospital tonight. Seemingly no COVID, but his heart had an irregular beat, and he has pneumonia and liquid on his lungs or whatever. He's 90 years old. He used to be pastor of Libertyville Church of the Brethren, my home church for years.